When attorney Elise Carter steps into a luxury car dealership to celebrate her success, she's met not with respect, but with open hostility. Refusing to be silenced, Elise turns her humiliation into a powerful lawsuit that exposes shocking truths about the dealership's discriminatory practices. As the legal battle unfolds, she faces relentless backlash and moments of crushing doubt. Yet her fight only strengthens her resolve to seek justice, not just for herself, but for everyone who's been told they don't belong. Will Elise's courage be enough to bring lasting change? Follow her intense journey for justice in Denied, Defied, and Victorious. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for every gripping moment. The golden light of morning seeped through the blinds, casting a warm glow over Elise Carter's bedroom. The familiar sound of the city waking up filled her small, meticulously organized apartment. Today, though, the city's noise was background music to Elise's thoughts. Today was a day she had dreamed about. A day for celebration. A reward for years of hard work and determination. Elise, a 32-year-old lawyer, had achieved what many thought was impossible for her. A top promotion at a prestigious law firm known for its challenging cases and high-profile clients. She'd fought tooth and nail for this position, and finally, it was hers. For Elise, a luxury car was more than a status symbol. It was a statement, a personal victory over every doubting voice, including her own, that had once told her she wouldn't make it. Elise sipped her coffee, savoring the rich, bitter flavor as she glanced over the polished brochure in her hand. The dealership, Jefferson Motors, was known for showcasing top-of-the-line models, from sleek sports cars to powerful SUVs. Elise had spent hours imagining herself driving out of there with the car she'd been eyeing, a white coupe with sleek lines and leather interiors, the epitome of class and elegance. The afternoon sun gleamed off Jefferson Motors' massive glass windows, reflecting the rows of luxury vehicles parked inside. Elise felt a rush of excitement as she approached the entrance, her heels clicking purposefully against the sidewalk. She was dressed in her best navy suit, her hair pulled back in a low bun, exuding confidence and professionalism. Her heart pounded with anticipation. As she reached for the polished handle of the glass door, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am, but we're closed." Startled, Elise turned to face a tall man in a security uniform standing nearby. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his face blank but his posture unyielding. The name tag on his chest read, Rick Nelson. She managed a polite smile, attempting to ease the unexpected tension. "Oh, I'm sorry," she replied, glancing at the hours displayed on the door. "The sign says you're open until 6. It's only a little past 4. Rick's face remained cold. "We're closed. You'll have to come back another time." Confused, Elise tried to reason with him. "I was hoping to just take a quick look at the new models. I'm planning to make a purchase and would appreciate the chance to see them." The guard's expression remained unchanged. "I said we're closed," he repeated, this time with a slow, condescending emphasis that made her blood run cold. Elise took a deep breath, keeping her tone measured. "I see. Could I speak with the manager then? Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." A quick flash of irritation crossed Rick's face. "The manager is busy, ma'am. Like I said, we're closed." His voice dropped slightly, and Elise caught a subtle shift in his tone. There was something underneath, a hint of dismissal, even contempt. Her heart tightened. But Elise had faced this before. She knew all too well the subtle signs of exclusion, the way people's voices would shift, their eyes flicker with something unspoken but unmistakable. She steadied herself, refusing to let her temper rise. "I'll wait for him to be available." Rick's stance shifted, his arms uncrossing as he stepped forward, narrowing the space between them. "You're not getting in, lady. I don't have time for this. Maybe there's a used car lot down the road. That might be more your speed." Elise's heart pounded with a mix of shock and anger, but she held her ground, feeling the tight knot of anger forming in her chest. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag, her jaw clenching as she fought the urge to respond. "That's not what I'm here for," she replied, her voice steady, refusing to let his words shake her. "I'm interested in what you sell here. Luxury cars. Now could you please get the manager?" The guard's gaze hardened, his lips curling into a slight sneer. "We're closed for your kind," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. The words hit her like a physical blow. Elise felt the knot in her chest tighten painfully, her composure wavering. She'd prepared herself for subtle biases, for the possibility of being overlooked. But the blatant prejudice in his words was something she hadn't anticipated. "Not here, not today." "I see," she whispered, her voice barely audible, hurt mixed with a simmering rage. "Fine, I'll leave." Without another word, Elise turned on her heel, her footsteps clicking sharply against the pavement as she walked away, her back straight, her head held high. She could feel Rick's gaze on her, a sense of satisfaction radiating from his stance. The humiliation, however, stayed with her, intensifying with every step. When she reached her car, she paused, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She took a few deep breaths, trying to collect herself, but the memory of his words and the smugness in his expression lingered. She watched, heart pounding, as a white woman in a simple sundress strolled up to the dealership doors and, without hesitation, was welcomed inside by Rick, who greeted her with a warm smile. Elise's grip on the wheel tightened. Elise sat in her car, watching the scene unfold in front of her. The stark contrast of Rick's hostility toward her versus the warmth he'd shown to the other customer. She felt a familiar pang of frustration, but this time it was sharper, cutting deeper. She closed her eyes, memories flooding her mind. Moments of subtle rejection. The casual disregard she'd experienced throughout her career and life. The anger simmered, but beneath it was a determination she couldn't ignore. She could leave it as it was, brush it off as she had with so many other slights, or she could do something about it. This wasn't just about a car. It was about being seen, being treated with respect, and standing up for herself in a world that often refused to see her. Elise pulled out her phone, dialing Laura's number. Laura Briggs had been her close friend and colleague since law school, a fellow attorney with a sharp mind and an unwavering sense of justice. Elise knew she could count on her, especially in moments like this. "Elise, hey!" Laura's voice was warm, a welcome sound amid the turmoil in Elise's heart. "I need to tell you something," Elise began, her voice steady but strained. She recounted the entire incident, from Rick's first dismissive words to his final blatant insult. Laura was silent as Elise spoke, and when Elise finished, she could almost feel the heat of Laura's anger through the phone. "That is unbelievable," Laura finally said, her tone laced with indignation. "This isn't just about one encounter, Elise. This is about accountability. If he's done this to you, who knows how many others he's treated the same way?" Elise nodded, feeling a surge of relief as Laura echoed her own thoughts. "I know, and I'm not going to let this go. I want to take action, Laura. I want to make sure he, and that dealership, understand they can't get away with this." Laura's voice softened. "We'll do this right, Elise. I'll stand by you. Let's hold them accountable." In that moment, a weight lifted from Elise's shoulders. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. She would fight, not just for herself, but for every person who had been told, subtly or openly, that they didn't belong. She would ensure that her voice, and their voices, were heard. With renewed determination, Elise took a deep breath, gripping the wheel and glancing back at the dealership in her rearview mirror. This was only the beginning. Elise's resolve grew stronger each day, fueled by the memory of Rick's words and the unshakable feeling of being dismissed, unseen. Together with Laura, she began laying the groundwork for her lawsuit against Jefferson Motors. Each step was meticulous, precise. This would not be a half-hearted attempt. It was a statement, a line in the sand that no one could ignore. Laura's experience as a civil rights attorney became invaluable. They pored over every detail, recounting the incident and drafting a clear, detailed narrative. Elise collected all documentation, her attempts to enter, the contrasting treatment of other customers, even photographs of the dealership's posted hours. Each piece of evidence was another building block in the wall of accountability they were constructing. "This isn't just about Rick," Laura reminded her during a late-night meeting. "The dealership hired him. They trained him, or didn't, as it seems. They allowed this culture to persist. Elise nodded, her determination hardening. I want them to know this isn't something they can sweep under the rug. Together, they filed the lawsuit, alleging discrimination and unequal treatment based on race. The dealership was notified, the court date set. Elise felt a strange sense of calm when the suit was official, a confidence that came from knowing she was standing up for what was right. The journey would be challenging, but she was ready. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly. Jefferson Motors issued a statement almost immediately, claiming the incident was a misunderstanding and denying any discriminatory intent. Elise read their words with a tightening chest, her frustration building as she recognized the subtle implication that she had exaggerated, that perhaps she was misinterpreting the situation. The media caught wind of the story, fueling debates online. Comments ranged from support to disbelief, and the worst of them accused her of fabricating the encounter for personal gain. Elise tried to steel herself against the words, but they cut deep, leaving her feeling raw and exposed. Elise, people are watching, Laura reminded her gently during one of their meetings. Some will support you, others won't. Focus on the ones who do. But the attacks didn't stop there. Elise noticed changes in her workplace. Colleagues who had once been friendly now avoided eye contact or sidestepped conversations. The air felt tense, and Elise could feel herself being scrutinized. Even her family, concerned by the emotional toll, hinted that perhaps it would be easier to settle, to let this battle go. Yet despite everything, Elise felt a strength within her she hadn't known before. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She thought about the people she could be standing up for, those who might never have had the chance. Letting go wasn't an option. Elise and Laura pushed forward, each day revealing new angles in their case. Laura's research unearthed surprising findings. Jefferson Motors had a history of similar complaints, most of which had gone unreported or settled quickly. Elise's case was not unique. It was part of a larger, systemic pattern. Their investigation led to a discovery that would become a turning point. Internal dealership documents detailing policies on target customers, with coded language that indirectly discouraged sales staff from engaging with certain demographics. It was subtle, but the language was unmistakable. Elise felt a mix of relief and sadness as they pieced together the evidence. She wasn't alone in what she'd experienced. Others had likely faced the same rejection. "We've got enough here to make this case ironclad," Laura told her one evening, her tone a mix of satisfaction and outrage. "They can't deny this. We'll expose everything." The evidence brought Elise a newfound resolve. She felt a righteous anger, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been quietly turned away or dismissed by the dealership's practices. Her case had transformed into a fight for justice, and she would make sure it resonated. As the trial date approached, Elise began to feel the immense toll of her decision. The constant stress of preparing her case left her physically and mentally exhausted. She struggled to sleep, her dreams haunted by Rick's sneer and the endless waves of public judgment. Even simple tasks felt daunting under the weight of the battle she was waging. Her relationships began to feel the strain. Friends she'd once confided in grew distant, and family members expressed quiet worry, hinting that perhaps it would be better to let go, to find peace outside the courtroom. Elise felt isolated, as if the world around her was closing in. Even Laura, her fiercest advocate, seemed to notice Elise's wavering resolve. One evening, Elise found herself alone at her apartment, staring blankly at the documents on her coffee table. She felt a profound loneliness, a longing for normalcy. She wondered if it would have been easier to accept Rick's behavior and move on with her life. The fight had become all-consuming, draining her of energy and spirit. That night, she called her mother, Carolyn, a woman of quiet strength who had faced her own battles against prejudice years ago. Carolyn listened, her voice calm and unwavering as Elise recounted her doubts, her fears of losing everything she'd worked for. "Elise, listen to me," Carolyn said, her voice steady. "You were raised to stand up for what's right. This fight isn't easy, but it's worth it. You're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing it for every person who's been told they don't belong. Remember that." Her mother's words reignited a spark within her. Elise felt a renewed strength, a reminder of why she'd started this battle. The weight of doubt eased, and she knew she couldn't give up. She wouldn't let Rick's words define her, or let Jefferson Motors continue their practices unchecked. The courtroom was packed on the day of Elise's trial, the air tense with anticipation. Reporters lined the benches, spectators whispered in hushed tones, and the dealership's legal team sat on the opposite side, their expressions steely and composed. Elise felt a rush of nerves as she took her place beside Laura, but she straightened her back, exuding a confidence she barely felt. The opening statements began, with Laura presenting a compelling case, laying out the facts with clarity and conviction. She painted a picture of Elise's experience, highlighting Jefferson Motors' history of discrimination and their subtly coded policies. Elise watched the jury's faces, seeing their expressions shift with each revelation. The dealership's attorney, Thomas Briggs, was relentless in his defense, attempting to undermine Elise's credibility, implying that she had misinterpreted Rick's behavior and questioning her intentions. Elise felt a surge of anger at his insinuations, but she held her composure, reminding herself of her purpose. At last it was her turn to testify. Elise took a deep breath as she walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on her. She spoke with a calm determination, recounting the incident in detail, describing Rick's words, his demeanor, and the humiliation she'd felt. Her voice grew steadier with each word, fueled by the memory of her mother's encouragement and Laura's unwavering support. When she finished, the courtroom was silent, the gravity of her testimony hanging heavy in the air. Elise looked at the jurors, hoping her words had reached them, that they saw the injustice in what she'd endured. As she left the stand, Laura met her gaze, a look of pride and encouragement in her eyes. The fight wasn't over, but Elise felt a sense of satisfaction, a knowledge that she had stood her ground and spoken her truth. The battle continued with Laura's meticulous presentation of the dealership's incriminating documents. The coded language, the pattern of complaints, each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of Jefferson Motors' practices. Elise watched the expressions of the jury as they absorbed the revelations, sensing the shift in the room. She felt a swell of hope. Act 2 escalates the emotional stakes, with Elise facing public backlash, isolation, and self-doubt as she pursues justice. This act culminates in the courtroom, where her testimony and Laura's evidence reveal the dealership's discriminatory practices, setting the stage for a climactic final showdown in Act 3. As the trial progressed, Elise found herself embroiled in the intensity of the courtroom. Every day felt like a marathon, with the dealership's attorneys using every tactic at their disposal to undermine her case. They questioned her credibility, suggested her intentions were purely financial, and tried to paint her as a dissatisfied customer out for revenge. But Laura was unyielding. She countered each argument with sharp logic and undeniable evidence, methodically piecing together the dealership's history of biased practices. She presented testimonies from former employees, documents showing their discriminatory policies, and statements from other customers who'd experienced similar treatment. Each piece built a foundation that Jefferson Motors attorneys struggled to dismantle. When Elise took the stand again, the dealership's lawyer, Thomas Briggs, attempted to rattle her, pressing her with rapid-fire questions. But Elise remained steady, answering with conviction and refusing to be intimidated. She spoke about her journey, her experiences, and her decision to stand up not just for herself, but for every person who'd been made to feel unwelcome. Elise's testimony, paired with the evidence Laura presented, seemed to resonate with the jury. She watched as they exchanged glances, a flicker of understanding in their eyes. For the first time, Elise felt the power of her words and the depth of her story penetrating through the courtroom's walls. She felt hope rising, steady and strong. After days of deliberation, the moment of the verdict arrived. Elise sat beside Laura, her hands tightly clasped, her heart pounding. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. Elise held her breath, feeling every second stretch as the foreperson stood to deliver the verdict. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Elise Carter." The words echoed in Elise's mind, and a wave of relief and vindication washed over her. Laura squeezed her hand, her smile warm with shared pride. Elise blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the realization that she had won, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel unworthy. The dealership was ordered to pay damages, but more importantly, they were required to overhaul their policies, implementing comprehensive diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. Elise knew that the monetary compensation was significant, but the real victory was in the systemic change she had fought for. The weight of her battle began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. In the weeks following the verdict, Elise experienced a whirlwind of emotions. Her story had made headlines, and she was both praised and criticized for her decision to take on such a public battle. Supportive letters poured in from individuals who had faced similar experiences, many of whom expressed gratitude for her courage. The messages reminded her of the deeper impact of her case, affirming that her fight had meant something beyond the courtroom walls. Elise was invited to speak at a conference on social justice and civil rights, where she shared her journey, recounting not only the struggle but also the moments of doubt, the unwavering support from Laura, and the strength she'd found in herself. She felt a new purpose emerging, a desire to advocate for change beyond her legal work. Her victory began to ripple outwards. Jefferson Motors implemented their promised changes, establishing diversity policies and committing to a new hiring process. Elise knew it would take time for these changes to make a lasting impact, but she felt hopeful that the dealership, and maybe even others like it, would become places where everyone could feel welcome. Several months after the case ended, Elise found herself driving past Jefferson Motors. On an impulse, she turned into the dealership's parking lot. The building looked the same, but she knew that the culture inside had shifted. She felt a sense of quiet satisfaction as she walked up to the entrance, no longer hesitant, her posture proud and self-assured. Inside, she noticed Rick Nelson, the guard who had once denied her entry. He was dressed in a less prominent role now, handling paperwork behind a desk. Elise didn't say anything. She simply looked his way, making sure he saw her. Their eyes met briefly, and she could see the flicker of recognition, perhaps even regret in his expression. Elise didn't need to confront him. Her presence was enough, a silent reminder of the justice that had been served. She turned and left, her heart lighter, her spirit stronger. She had no desire for revenge. She had already won in every way that mattered. Life after the lawsuit took on a new vibrancy for Elise. She was still practicing law, but her perspective had changed, deepened by the battle she'd fought. Inspired by her experience, she spearheaded a new initiative at her firm, advocating for diversity and inclusion within the corporate world. Her efforts began to shape the firm's approach to equality, making it a more welcoming place for clients and colleagues alike. At a gathering to celebrate her achievements, Laura pulled her aside, her eyes gleaming with pride. "I always knew you'd make a difference, Elise. But this is beyond what I imagined." Elise smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for her friend. "I couldn't have done it without you, Laura. You stood by me every step of the way." The journey had been grueling, filled with challenges and heartache. But standing there, surrounded by friends and supporters, Elise felt a profound sense of peace. She had fought, she had endured, and she had prevailed, not just for herself but for a future that now seemed a little brighter. As she drove home that evening, Elise passed Jefferson Motors one last time. The building loomed in the distance, its lights gleaming in the dark. But this time, it was simply a part of her past, a chapter closed. Elise smiled, her heart swelling with the quiet confidence that comes from standing up for one's truth. She was ready for whatever came next, knowing she had the strength to face it. Act 3 brings the story to its climactic peak, with the courtroom scenes and the final verdict providing a powerful emotional release. Elise's victory, both legal and personal, marks her transformation and the beginning of a new chapter focused on advocacy and change. The final act closes on a note of quiet resolution, as Elise moves forward with newfound purpose and self-assurance. This completes the outline and draft of the entire story. The structure balances emotional highs and lows, climaxes and resolutions, and stays within the parameters of advertiser-friendly guidelines. Please let me know if you'd like additional revisions or further expansions in any specific part of the story. 2 years had passed since the case that had transformed Elise Carter's life, and left a lasting impact on the community. Elise's work had shifted toward a more focused mission of advocacy, driven by the cause she had come to champion. Through her initiative, Empowerment and Justice, Elise created programs to provide legal resources to marginalized communities, giving individuals the support they needed to address issues of discrimination in professional spaces. The program rapidly gained recognition, drawing in professionals and volunteers passionate about equality and justice. Elise often found herself speaking at conferences, leading workshops, and sharing her story, each word driven by the memory of her own experience and the resilience it had instilled in her. One evening, as Elise prepared for an award ceremony where she would be honored for her work, she paused to reflect on how far she had come. She remembered standing in front of Jefferson Motors, feeling the weight of Rick's words and the humiliation they had brought. But she also remembered the surge of strength that had risen within her, the decision to fight, and the realization that her journey was about more than just a car. "You changed things," she thought, feeling a sense of pride mixed with gratitude. She knew that each step in her journey had helped pave the way for others, leaving a trail of courage and resilience for those who might one day face similar challenges. A part of her journey's impact extended to Jefferson Motors itself, a dealership now unrecognizable from the place it had once been. The lawsuit had not only brought about financial consequences, but had also spurred lasting internal changes. The company had undergone a complete overhaul, establishing rigorous diversity training for all employees and implementing inclusive hiring practices that emphasized respect and equality. Alex Benton, the dealership's new manager, had reached out to Elise months after her victory, inviting her to observe the changes. Initially hesitant, Elise had finally agreed, curious to see the effects of her efforts. Walking through the newly remodeled showroom, she saw a diversity among the staff and a palpable shift in the dealership's atmosphere. Each interaction between employees and customers reflected the inclusive culture Elise had fought to bring about. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. At the award ceremony, Elise was presented with a plaque recognizing her dedication to justice and her contributions to societal change. Her speech was heartfelt, filled with anecdotes from her journey and a message of empowerment. She encouraged others to stand up, to use their voices, and to remember that every act of courage, no matter how small, could create ripples of change. After her speech, Elise was approached by several young law students, their faces bright with admiration. One of them, a young black woman named Trina Wilson, expressed how much Elise's case had inspired her to pursue a career in civil rights law. "Your story taught me to see law as a tool for justice," Trina said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to do what you did, stand up against injustices, no matter the cost." Elise felt a warmth spread through her heart, recognizing the significance of passing the torch to a new generation. She knew the journey was far from over, but seeing young people inspired by her story reminded her that the fight for justice would continue. Later that evening, Elise returned to her apartment, placing the award plaque beside the photographs of her family. She thought of her mother, whose words had been a source of strength throughout her journey. Elise knew that every sacrifice, every long night and painful moment of doubt, had been worth it. As she settled into her chair, Elise allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had found not only her voice but her purpose, a calling that transcended her role as a lawyer and made her an advocate, a leader, and a voice for change. Elise closed her eyes, breathing in the stillness, knowing that she had made a difference. Her legacy was no longer just her own. It was shared with every person she had inspired, every life she had touched. And as she drifted into peaceful contemplation, she felt ready for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength to face them, whatever they might be. This epilogue adds the final emotional resolution, showing Elise's journey from her personal triumph to becoming an inspiration and a leader for social justice. It highlights how her actions continue to resonate, ensuring that her legacy endures as a beacon for others facing similar struggles. This brings the story to a heartfelt and satisfying conclusion. Let me know if you'd like to add any more details, or if there's anything specific you want further developed.